I needed a lot more education. I needed to learn the industry much better. But I also needed to understand who was doing what and looking for those best practices. And that's where you stop talking and you start listening. And you surround yourself with smarter people than you. And you listen and you learn. And you have to handpick those people.
Welcome to Connected FM, a podcast connecting you to the latest insights, tools, and resources to help you succeed in facility management. This podcast is brought to you by IFMA, the leading professional association for facility managers. If you are ready to grow your network and advance in your career, go to ifma.org to get started. In today's episode, Kelsey Hirsch, a managing vice president at Sodexo, interviews Teena Shouse, past chairman of IFMA's Global Board of Directors, on the importance and impact of women in facilities management. They discuss Teena's journey into FM, her strategic approach to career planning, and the importance of mentorship and inspiration. The conversation highlights the progress of gender diversity within IFMA's leadership and emphasizes the need to balance professional aspirations with personal well-being. Now, let's get into it.
Hello, my name is Kelsey Hirsch, and I'm a vice president in workplace solutions at Sodexo and past panel member and facilitator of several women in FM sessions at IFMA World Workplace over the years. March 8th is International Women's Day, and what better time to look back and discuss the important role women have played in shaping the facilities management industry around the world, and look forward to ways in which women can play an even more important role in FM's future. Today is very exciting as I'll be facilitating a terrific discussion with someone who has had critical intersections in the FM space for decades. She's a past chairman of the IFMA Board of Directors and past chair of Global FM Board of Directors. With decades of experience, she continues to provide consulting and insights into FM through her leadership at FM Transitions. And now, let me introduce the one, the only, Teena Shouse.
Thank you, Kelsey. As usual, it's great to be with you. Although using decades twice might be a little overkill, okay? I'm just saying.
Fair enough. And we don't really want to point it out, I don't think, at our age. But Teena, I mean, you have been an inspiration to me for years, right? Since I first met you in my role, I think 11 years ago. And a lot of that is because of the role you've played in IFMA and in FM progression, FM management professions progression, right? And also because of your passion. I mean, you're always very interested, very engaging, and also very innovative. I know a lot about you, but for those who don't know about you, can you share a little bit about just your background in facilities management and your career overall?
Sure. Well, I was kind of a late bloomer into facility management. It's not like I, grew up saying, oh my goodness, when I grow up, I want to be a facility manager. I had a couple of different positions that kind of fed into that, in that I worked for waste management. I worked for ARA Services back in the day before it became Aramark. And they prepared me for a position within facility management. Although when my client from Sprint asked me to become a facility manager, I looked him straight in the face and said, why me? And I said, I really don't understand facility management. I don't really know what they do exactly. And he said, I can teach you those things. He said, but I want someone who has the passion and the caring and will work hard. And I said, I can do that. Sure, why not? And so he gave me some very good advice. He told me, John never asked much. He told me, go back to school, get some more business education, and join IFMA. And that was in 1990. And so from that, I stayed in IFMA on the local chapter and then set my sights a little bit higher. And that happened about 5 years after that, I guess it was. And I was at a World Workplace, which I would highly recommend everybody goes to World Workplace. And at World Workplace, I was watching a ceremony and I was looking up there and I was saying, I could do that. I could be on the board of directors. And then I said, how can I do that? So like anything else, you can't just sit there And I've always said, hope is not a strategy. So I had to put together my plan. And that's what I did.
So that's really interesting because while I think about making plans at work all the time, I don't really think about making plans for myself. And unfortunately, that's just me, right? I'm an eternal procrastinator by nature, which is something that I always struggle with at work. I think it's really interesting that you made a plan to hit a goal. And it comes across as sounding kind of simplistic when I say it out loud like that, but
No,
I think it's interesting. But I'm not sure that as many people do that. Let me take a step back for a second first, though. So you made a plan to get to the board of directors. That was your ultimate goal, yeah?
Yes.
So here's what I think is interesting. When IFMA was founded in the 80s, there were 2 women on the board out of, what does the board make up? 15, 12 people?
12.
Okay, so 2 women out of 12, that's, I don't even know what the percentage is, right? Less than
Low.
20%.
Low.
Yeah, exactly. And one of IFMA's core values, though, and even their core values then, was around recognizing the benefit of diversity, inclusion, different experiences, right? So that's like a core value to theirs. They started with 2 women. Now, as I was doing some of my investigation for this, I figured out that literally half the board is now women, right?
Absolutely. It's fabulous.
It is. It's unbelievable, right? To have that representation in the board. Here's what's really interesting, though. Only 23% of the facilities management workforce globally is women, which is really interesting, right? So we've got half the board of directors of IFMA, women, only 23% of the workforce globally, women. And if you dig down into leadership, right, like IFMA leadership, men outnumber women 9-1. So less than, say, 12% of FM leaders are women. So I think it's really interesting how IFMA is like leading the charge on that. The other thing that I think is really interesting is, one could argue about the pros and cons of gender diversity, right? But there's like a very objective statistic around companies that have greater diversity in their workforce, whether it's gender diversity or any other diversity, actually outperform financially their peers globally. And when you break it down by region, the other thing I thought was super interesting is, like, in Europe, organizations that are gender diverse actually outperform their peers by as much as 7%, which, is a significant difference. I mean, It's just not a percent or two. It's really significant. And so when I think about these diverse experiences, and then you talk about your plan, right? You try to marry the two. I want to talk first about your plan, because that literally is a roadmap, I think, for people, regardless of gender, on how to reach a goal in a certain time frame. Because your plan was like, what, 10 years? Like, you had a long plan.
That was that specific goal. Yes.
Yeah. So talk to me about that. Like, how do you do that?
Well, it's not unlike you would do if you had a project at work. I've always been a Covey fan, right? I loved Stephen Covey. I used to speak about him and just absolutely thought he was the best. So you go back to the basics. You begin with the end in mind. So my dream, my vision was to be walking across the stage and being introduced. And then further, when I reached that first goal, then it's like, okay, I'm on the board of directors. Now I want to be chairman.
And so how long was your plan to be on the board?
10 years.
Like how long? So a 10-year plan to be on the board.
And I became chairman. And I became chairman in 10 years. So I surpassed my goal.
How many more years did you think you would have to be on the board to become chairman?
Well, see, an interesting story. So normally you serve on the board of directors for 2 years, and then you either say goodbye and they thank you for your service, or they move you to the EC. And I had a mentor who believed in me. And he went to the powers to be and said, she needs 1 more year. And then let's move her to the EC. So I was granted 1 more year as a normal director on the board. And then because of my champion, because of my mentor, because somebody who believed in me and I had proven myself to, right? Championed me and said, give her one more year, let's put her on the EC. And I think you'll be pleased with the results. So that was but that happened as a result of the entire, and I also believe in SMART objectives, right? Specific, measurable. So I had to be very specific about what I wanted to do, how I wanted to craft this path, if you will. And it involved education.
Okay.
I needed a lot more education. I needed to learn the industry much better. But I also needed to understand who was doing what and looking for those best practices. And that's where you stop talking and you start listening. And you surround yourself with smarter people than you. And you listen and you learn. And you have to handpick those people. I had some amazing mentors. And they were every one of my mentors were with IFMA. And I'm still friends with either their widows or I'm still friends with them. And because all of my mentors have been men.
Which is, what is your thought about that? I have mixed feelings, right? Because there was a time years and years ago where that was the mantra, which was find a man to be your champion. And I suppose if you think about the odds, right, if 23% of women are in the workforce that are in FM professions, that means 77% are men. And so, and you do that 9-to-1 ratio, right, on leadership. I guess the likelihood is you have a larger pool of men to choose from. But I'm just curious, do you think that's changed? I look in my own organization and I'm blessed enough that my direct manager, the woman that I report to, is a woman. And all 3 of her next level managers, of which I am one, are also women. And so, we're lucky, right? Because that's just the makeup of our organization. But what are your thoughts on that? Is there a benefit to having a man as a mentor, or is it somewhat agnostic? It's more of the role that they take on.
I don't think that had anything to do with the fact that they were males. They were just very open to adopting me, right?
Got it.
I don't know that it made any difference. But one thing I do want to backtrack for just a little bit, even though I never had women that were mentors. That's not to say that I didn't engage with women who inspired me. And there's a difference. There's a difference between having someone as a mentor and having someone inspire you. And, I've been very lucky and with IFMA and also with Sprint and especially with FEA. I was with Facility Engineering Associates for 8 years. And I was one of only 2 women that were on their board and were principals of the organization. And now one of those women is now leading the organization, Lori Gilmer. And Maureen Ruskowski has just, risen to that leadership position. So, those women inspire me I watch them and I see how they move through the world and how they move up through the world. And so even though they're not truly mentors, you can be an inspiration.
I think that's really important because it goes back to I can do that. What do you remember when you were sitting in the audience and you decided that, right? You put that line in the sand. How many women were on that stage?
I don't remember any.
Wow.
I really don't, because I guess I just wasn't focused. I was just, not very many, if any at all. But now that's changed too. So what's really interesting about that is a few years ago, we did a special opening for World Workplace, and they chose 5 of us to tell our story of progressing in IFMA. And that was what was really interesting. Then there were 5 of us and 3 of us were women.
Teena, how many people do you think consciously make a plan like you did? Because I just did the math in my head. So you said in 10 years, I'm going to be on the board. And in 2 years after that, I'm going to be the chair. You achieved the chairperson role within 10 years, which means you hit the board at 7 or 8 in your plan. So you set out milestones. I'm going to make a couple of just project management principle assumptions, right?
Sure.
You set out milestones, right? And they were measurable and they were achievable. How frequently did you check in on yourself? Well, 2 questions. One is, Give me an example of a milestone that was in your plan. And then how frequently did you check in on your incremental achievement to make sure you were still on plan?
Well, bottom line, my advice to anybody that wants to do this, and it's kind of the plan. I wasn't absolutely strict on it, but I tried to do anywhere from 1 to 2 hours a week on literally working on me, working on whether that was attending a class, whether that was going to a conference, whether that was watching. We didn't have as many. I don't think we had Zoom. I know we didn't have Zoom back then.
Right.
But going to classes, going to speeches, and always attending the IFMA conferences. And so I would do a check-in at least once a week and just really and just stay focused. And there's so much distractions out there, women especially. And one of the things I'm going to do some homework because I want to challenge some thoughts that you gave me about the percentage of women in facility management. And I'm 99% sure that I've read that we lost ground during COVID because women had to stop and go back to taking care of the family. Yeah. And so I would venture to guess that before COVID, it was over 23%, but we'll have to do that for podcast number 2.
Staying on top of facility management trends just got a whole lot easier. IFMA's FMJ magazine is now completely digital. Explore the latest trends, strategies, and expert insights, all streamlined and 100% free. No fluff, no hassle, just the tools you need to stay ahead. Start reading now at fmj.ifma.org.
We'll do that. We'll challenge each other a little bit. I mean,
go ahead.
Oh, no, please.
No, I was just going to say the other thing that we have talked about is how things have changed, throughout the world. And one of the biggest aha moments for me was when I led a delegation for people to China. And I was able to, there were 27 of us, 28 of us, I believe it was. And the women, we were probably about a third. And this was back in 2007.
Wow.
And these were women that were leaders in their organization. They were either facility managers at a major university, or they were, a company working for very large companies. And the men also were facility managers for big corporations. This was by invitation. And that's where I met, some incredible women. In fact, one of the women I now serve on her advisory board. Maxine started this fantastic organization called MCFM Academy. And I just joined them as an advisor. And it's basically just training and networking for advanced, kind of that next level of FM professionals. And, the Academy is making great strides. And that's what I like to see. And that's what's really cool about being involved in this is we're an international group. When we have a board meeting or an advisory meeting, it's all in teams, and half of the names some of the names I can't even pronounce. And so it's very much more globally expanding. And what I'm learning, and I'm on my sundown. I'm sundowning, right? And it's time for me to move over and make room for other people. But I still want to reach out. I still want to teach when I can. And I still want to expose people to what the possibilities are out there. And especially whether it's IFMA, whether it's to MCFM Academy, whatever it is, we're just so blessed that there's so much more out there for us today.
So you actually gave me a really good segue here. Okay. So we talked a little bit about your plan, right? And how much time to focus on yourself, which I think is something that most of us don't do enough of in any way, shape, or form as women. We're always doing things for others, whether it's your children, whether it's your partner, whether it's your extended family, your friends, et cetera. It's just kind of an innate thing. But, you reference your sundowning, which goes back to the decades, which we don't have to talk about. But it brings up an interesting thing, right? Which is that the workforce is aging, whether it's facility managers, whether it's frontline trades people, the workforce is aging. I mean, just the population is aging
Sure.
overall, right? And you couple that with something that I read recently, which I think was a little bit disconcerting because I'm in that middle upper management phase, which is younger people do not want my job, right? And I
Really?
lead a team of like 9 people. Not one of them wants to be my successor. And the article pointed out, I mean, I've been trying to think about this a little bit, and I think I know the answer, but then this article really pointed some things out to me, which is, people in Generation Z, right, which are really the people that we're trying to develop and mentor. They see the stress that middle managers, which is really kind of their first, second line of promotion, right, depending on the role that they're in, are under due to things like layoffs and reductions in force, due to things like regulatory chaos, right? Or change, depending on what's going on. And they don't want that stress, right? They're literally looking at this whole quality of life thing.
Very much
And
so.
they're not interested in upending their quality of life for another $10,000 of salary, right? And that incremental thing. And so it got me to thinking, and I'm curious what you would think about if you are in a leadership role and you have people on your team that you really have identified as somebody who has great potential for growth. How can you inspire them, especially if they're on your team and you see them as a successor, right? And for me, like my greatest joy in being a leader is empowering my team to become successful. And that's different for every single person. But if that's the case, what is your advice to me or for anybody that wants to inspire a person on their very own team to advance in their profession, to grow in their profession, which may or may not mean promotion? But what advice do you have in that regard?
I think it's twofold. First of all, I have always believed in the balance of life and keeping good balance. And I think that's why I've been married 51 years and why I have a very strong array of great friends and a wonderful community. So I think trying to move them along, but helping them understand they don't have to sacrifice both. They really don't. If you find that balance, that's the number one thing. And then number two, you have to help them see things that they may not see in themselves. Now, it's been quite a while since I've managed anybody. And I used to love it. When I was at Sprint, I loved managing people. I loved developing them and taking them. I mean, I have gentlemen that in 1992 were delivering mail and for administrative services because we weren't facility management yet. And, we went to a reunion not too long ago of our building, celebrating the building of our campus. And this gentleman, he's not a young man anymore, is now a vice president at T-Mobile. And, that's really quite lovely. But what I now find that I get an opportunity to do that more is when I teach. And so I just referenced this in an email just about 2 hours ago. There's a gentleman that was in one of my Essentials of FM class, and it was a virtual class. And I just saw such potential in this guy. And I said, I've got to talk to him. And so I invited him for coffee. And he drove all the way from Columbia, Missouri. And long story short, he's taking a whole group of people to Facility Fusion next month or in April and getting them very involved. And then another same class, there was a woman who was at the head of housekeeping at one of the universities. And I stopped right after one of the classes. I called her and I said, "Do you have a minute to talk?" And she said, "Sure, what?" And I said, I want to be your mentor." And she goes, "To do what?" I'm head of the housekeeping. And I said, "You have potential. You have true potential, but you need to find out so how to use that potential, but keeping balance and understanding what makes you happy." And so long story short, she's now a supervisor at one of the largest arboretums in the state of Missouri. And she's the supervisor there now. And she's working with flowers and trees and bees and tourists. And it's fabulous.
Oh, that's a great story. I mean, I think to your point, being able to be close enough and volunteering for the mentorship versus being sought out. I love about just you're talking about finding an inspiration and then turning around and being an inspiration, right? Because you've lived it, you breathed it, and you've demonstrated it. I mean, not to mention the 51 years of success in a marriage, which in and of itself is amazing. Um,
But I think that's the joy. I mean, I think that's our responsibility. I think that is, we have been blessed. And I really believe in the giving back, right? That's why I sit on the board of 2 nonprofit organizations that, are charitable donate, organizations. And if you continue to give back when you've been blessed, I mean, that's your responsibility. That's the payback.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I think our time is coming to an end, Teena, but I want to thank you. I've got a couple of key takeaways here. Let me know if I forgot anything, right? I mean, first and foremost, it's make a plan and dedicate time for yourself to meet that plan. And I don't think it matters, or you tell me, it doesn't matter how long it is or how short it is, how aspirational it is or not.
And maybe segment. Some people, not everybody can do the 10-year plan. So if you can't, do it in chunks. Break it up in chunks that you're comfortable with. Okay.
The next thing that I have as a takeaway here is find not only a mentor, but an inspiration. And it could be 2 different people, right?
Very much so.
And I think it would be safe to say, as I think about my experience, that it's not necessarily the same person the entire way through. It's as you gain your experience and you check those boxes in your plan. And then the last thing I think that I heard is to give back, be that inspiration once you've had an opportunity to put the experience under your belt and be there for that next generation so that they really see the excitement. I remember the whole reason that I love what I do. People used to ask me on a plane years ago, well, what do you do for a living? And I never said I was in facilities management.
Because they would have drawn a blank.
Well, nobody would have known, right? Yeah. I always said my job is to make people believe that I am meeting the expectations that they have. That's what I always say. We only had so much budget, right, to deliver the services. And so you want them to believe that the services that they get is what they always needed all along. That makes for a much more interesting plane ride conversation. But being that inspiration back, exciting the next generation of women, making them feel like they really do have something to contribute, I think is huge.
They certainly do.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing I would like to leave you with is the next time somebody asks, if you're a facility manager, next time somebody asks, what do you do for a living? You say, I am a solution architect. I solve problems.
There you go. There you go. Teena Shouse, thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
Very much appreciate it. You bet. You bet.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning into the Connected FM podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the show because it really helps us reach more listeners just like you. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. See you next time.